how rapidly are you seeing changes in the brain with the Cerathrive?
Yeah, after a 10-minute session,
Really?
you can see the changes, yeah. And I must admit, I genuinely think that I have made some cognitive jumps myself just doing the testing. But yeah, no, I finally delivered all the pre-orders, so everyone's got the device. I now have stock in the warehouse. Well, this is because I did one of the first university qualifications in PBM.
That's right.
Which is in Montpellier in France. If you're weaned off drugs, if you don't do drugs for 10 years, your brain still hasn't been rewired.
So I'm at PBM 2024 and I bump into Sarah Turner from Cerathrive. So I ask her, hey, can we have a catch up? I know you've got a lot going on, but I want to know what is happening. So Cera has just released and just started shipping her Cerathrive product. So in this conversation, I ask a little bit more about that, but I also ask about the latest thing she's learning around the brain and red light therapy. She's also involved in an upcoming course held in France that is also available to people online. So she shares a little bit about that. And we also talk about a bunch of other unrelated things, such as red light therapy penetration and body fat levels, the impacts of red light therapy on the brain, both good and bad, and the latest research on mechanisms of action behind red light therapy. So let's get into it. So you've just come down from Shark Tank here at PBM 2024. How was it? How did it go? Did you win?
They don't tell you yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're being judged as we speak. But yeah, had some stiff competition.
Yeah.
But actually it turned into a really good session. There's a lot of brain stuff. So it was really interesting for me. It seems to me a lot of people are very keen on focusing research on brain PBM.
So what was your pitch? What were you looking to get funding for?
So it was a pitch to get a small amount of money, it's like $2,000, to put towards research of your choice. Now I'm trying to get obviously a lot of research done as much as I can ahead of time, and I've been pairing up with Professor Paul Chazot of Durham University, because he's one of the leading experts. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. He's also a big advocate of using longer wave red light.
How long?
So like his thing is 1068 nanometers.
It's becoming more and more popular. Like over the last day or two, more and more people pushing up to that 1050, 1060 mark.
That's right, and it's really interesting. So he's been researching that for a long time. I actually went there last year to Durham and met his PhD student who was doing a lot of stuff on fruit flies and looking to see, okay, does it actually produce more ATP? What happens? Does it release a nitric oxide? Because people are starting to look more and more at the mechanisms now. I don't know if you picked that up from this event.
Yes.
Because before it was just, it's cytochrome C oxidase and that's it, end of story. Now it seems there's a lot of other mechanisms coming out. And potentially the 1068, 1070 has more mechanisms than just cytochrome C oxidase.
But now, are you finding, well, based on the research that you're seeing, that that particular wavelength is actually having superior benefit or different benefits to 850, for instance? Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, and it's really interesting too about penetration, because the different wavelengths are going to be absorbed by different molecules and things in your body. So once you get past 900 nanometers, water becomes a main chromophore. And because water becomes a chromophore, the water starts to absorb the light as it goes through the tissue. So there is actually an argument that it's going to penetrate a lot less, the 1060, let's say 1070, just so, but we know there's a tolerance either side of that. But the 1070 wavelength potentially is going to penetrate less because it gets absorbed by the water before it maybe gets down to the tissue. So for things like joints, it might not actually get as deep as 850.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought, because I thought the 1050, 1060, 1070 was, the benefits were more around the brain side of things, cognitive side of things. I know there's a few products out there already using it.
But joints are water, right? If you think about what's going on in the body, so much of it is water. And so much of the proteins in our body, they're hydrated proteins. And so the function of proteins, wherever it is in our body, depends on the quality of the hydration. So if you're able to potentially change the structure of the water around proteins by using that longer wavelength, that could be one of the mechanisms. Not just in the brain, it could be, even in the joint. I mean, think of all that synovial fluid that you've got in there. If you can, in effect, charge that or make that maybe more viscous so that, your joint can work better, that could be one of the ways that PBM is working, not at all related to cytochrome C oxidase. It's a totally different mechanism. It's actually changing the structure of the water rather than causing that direct release of ATP.
I wouldn't be surprised if in like 5-10 years time there's half a dozen other mechanisms that we uncovered.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy with all this research that's out there, and like you have James Carroll, you know, you have some guys here who have been in the space, 30, 40 years, and they're still like, we still don't know how it really works. I mean,
still don't know. And then also they're coming out, you know, there's been a lot of talk this morning about heat shock proteins and heat and light gated ion channels. Now, nobody was really talking about that before, and now I've seen like 3 talks about heat gated ion channels, which again is a potential mechanism that's not that direct mitochondrial cytochrome C oxidase. So I think as more research comes out, it kind of gets muddier and muddier, not clear.
I know, right? And it's why when people come out and say, oh, this is a protocol, this is the dosing, this is the wavelength, game, set, match, it's like, we don't really know. Like, there's so much we don't know. How disruptive do you think that'll be in terms of like, we're seeing all these companies now with products. I mean, you have a product yourself. Like, do you think that in a year or two, you'll start fresh and like, how disruptive is this new science that is coming out? Or do you think like it's more, we've got the framework up, it's now just, fleshing out those finer details?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we know red light therapy works.
Yeah.
I mean, we can kind of argue all day about how it works, but, man on the street just wants to know, okay, do I get pain relief? Does my brain work better?
Yeah.
Do my organs function better? So I think we already know it happens. How it happens, we're just starting to work that out. But you don't necessarily need to know that detail to get the benefit of light therapy.
Yeah.
We had a question and answer. I don't know if you were in that session, and they were saying, okay, what do we need to make this mainstream? And somebody on the panel, I think it was Praveen, said we need more education so people understand how it works. And I was thinking, I don't know. If you ask the person next to you on the train, do you know how paracetamol works? Do you know what I mean? They're highly unlikely to give you the whole biological mechanism of a paracetamol, but they're happy to use it because they take it and it works, they get rid of the headache, boom. So I think we know it works. So all of this is just finessing. I mean, it obviously helps us to understand. But from my point of view as a producer of the kit, no, I love all this because I can integrate that. If someone suddenly comes out and says, no, 850 is the one for like the cerebellum, my unit is such that I can just switch that light out pretty quick.
Yeah, right.
But so as long as we're kind of responding, I think you can just do what's best at the time with the information that you have. And we know it gets a result.
Yeah.
So that's great. If we can finesse it so that we can kind of individualize and really target different applications, good. Yeah. And maybe that's where it's going. We'll start to find out, okay, 800 is better if you're looking at joints.
Yeah.
900 is good if you want to get to the brain. In fact, that's what one of the ladies was saying upstairs. She was looking at pulsing because that's a whole nother thing. And she was saying that the cerebellum cells seem to respond to theta pulsing and the frontal cortex seems to respond to gamma. And then you're like, that's it. It's a mouse model. Does that translate? We don't know. But these little things, I think the more and more information, as long as people can integrate it incrementally, we'll get there in the end. Yeah. But it's a very interesting subject. It's a very interesting field we've chosen to be in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Frustrating as well.
Really frustrating, yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that are like, just tell me what wavelength or what duration, and it's like, well, I don't know. Like, trust me, I mean, if I would love to know. I'm sure everyone here would love to know. But yeah, like you said, people are getting such good results with products, protocols that are quite diverse. I mean, a good example, you have 2 companies out there side by side with their booths, both with brain products, totally different ends of the spectrum in terms of radiances, right? And both of them have testimonials and doing good. It's good, but it can also be frustrating.
Yeah, it can be a little bit frustrating, you're right. So things like trying to do, because we have a lot of mouse model studies, we have a lot of these things. I think my pitch up in the Shark Tank thing was to try and get some clinical data and to start to integrate things like wearables.
Right.
Because here everybody's super clinical, you have to have gold standard clinical trial. And I'm going through it with Paul Chazot, his research ethics. I have to do healthy people because it takes short with research ethic, and really we have so much data that we're just leaving on the floor that we could be collecting. So my pitch was actually to start to integrate. I have a fabulous entrepreneur that I met at one of the women's biohacking events who's developed some tech for looking at emotionality scores.
Yeah.
So it's an app, it's called In Truth, and it just connects to a wearable. She uses BioStrap. It uses heart rate variability, but it can actually predict in real time your emotional state. So, and I know when people are using my device, because my app records when the device is being used. So we can track in real time, does your emotional state correlate with your use of red light therapy?
Yeah, right.
Very simple. Yeah. You know, it's maybe not a recognized, standardized test, but it will give us some good data. And of course, in the background with all of this tech, it gives you sleep, gives you exercise, you know, some of them gives you oxygen. So you could really do some interesting broadly we think that people's mood elevates 10 minutes after using red light. It's great data. We just need data. And maybe we need to not be so hung up on going through this procedure of doing these double-blind trials, because there's just not enough funding. We'll never get there. We'll be sitting here in another 30 years.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe looking a little bit wrinklier and just say, oh, we wish we knew how it worked. We'll get there soon.
Do you think, are there any other biomarkers? Like, are there any other ways you could quantify this? Like, you put a device on, I don't know, on your gut, on your full body panel even. Like, I know there's very scientific medical procedures and whatnot where they're literally going in and looking at cells and whatnot. But are there any other tests? Like, is there someone that could do a before and after experiment and go to the doctors and get a lab test and then a follow-up? Like, is there anything like that you're aware of?
Well, it depends what you're looking at. I mean, there's tons of stuff you could do. I'm partnering with a company that makes a soft QEEG that just gives you a nice QEEG reading, and it looks to show you where your relevant profiles are with regards to your brainwaves. Then you can wear my device, then you can do a measurement after, and you can do a measurement an hour after. Yeah,
right. Yeah, see, that's the sort of thing, because a lot of people, I get a lot of people like, oh, I want to test it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well...
Yeah, I'm coming out soon. I'm going to sell it as a bundle. It's kind of like for the biohackers who really want to know that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bundle up with this company. It's called Neurosophy. Yes. Really cool. Very simple. Let's look at your brainwaves and let's look at it after. And my ultimate goal is we can then tailor the program. Oh, your beta's low. Let's give you a bit more of that frequency and see if your brain comes up. And then you can track your own subjective.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's all very well to know these levels. Does it actually impact your life?
Of course.
But there's reason to believe it does. So that is something I do. Of course, I'm sure you track your heart rate variability. That's a good general.
Yeah, true. How rapidly are you seeing changes in the brain, like with the Cerathrive?
Yeah, after a 10-minute session,
really?
You can see the changes, yeah.
Have you ever done any real-time measurement, like EEGs, while I suppose you'd get interference, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's difficult to do them at the same time. That's the problem. I've had it where you have like the full one, you know, the one where they kind of put it in a bucket and put it on, but, you know, then you do get, it's difficult to have the light on at the same time, but you can do it immediately after.
Yeah.
I mean, they were talking actually in that talk about doing MRI with devices on, but again, you know, you need a lot of money for that.
There's a lot of devices out there aimed for, you know, cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, dementia, all that sort of stuff. I've spoke to a few of the company founders, and it's like, hey, is there any benefit for someone like myself? You know, I don't think I have any cognitive decline. Is there any benefit me using it? And typically they say, well, no, but we don't know. But like, that's not what we're marketing for. It's not what we've made this for. With your product, it's a little bit different. Are you, like, who's your target customer? Is it someone like myself? And what could I be?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time in the biohacker, and that's about being the best that you can be, you know, using yourself as a baseline. And Paolo Cassano, who's given a great talk, I think he's probably on this afternoon, he's done some great stuff on cognitive enhancement in healthy adults.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he's shown you can have quite a significant increase in cognitive abilities from using red light, going from a baseline.
Wow.
And I must admit, I genuinely think that I have made some cognitive jumps myself just doing the testing.
Yeah.
You know, just some bizarre things, like I have a friend, I don't have physics. I went to an all-girls school. I had to pick 2 sciences, couldn't pick physics, right? I feel like it's been a handicap trying to get to grips with this. I have a friend who's always trying to explain to me morphic resonance or resonant frequencies in the brain. Reading for many years. And then I was testing my device, so I was using it a bit more often. I genuinely think, I think I understand. I think I'm beginning to understand how it works, because you really have to shift a different brain to start thinking in terms of physics. If you're not used to it, you know, it's a bit mind-blowing because it's abstract. So I really think that my abstract thinking has improved just from using the device.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, can you just hit the like button? I really do appreciate it. All right, let's get back to the interview. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I hope so. I'm sure it would be. I'm sure there has to be benefits, short-term and long-term.
Yeah, you can always be better, surely. You know, if you're someone you're sleeping perfectly, you're eating perfectly, you've got really excellent relationships, but who can maintain that all the time? There's always weak spots, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, one day you might not have slept. One day, you know, you've eaten a load of the canapes or whatever, and you can't. So using that red light, I think, just maybe helps you keep your...
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I going off down a tangent a little bit here. I haven't slept that well the last few days with literally relocating countries, time zones, and all that. Move up, come up here for this event. Busy. And I did a NovoTHOR session. First time I've ever done one. Full 20 minutes. And it was amazing afterwards. Like, I thought it was going to be a wreck yesterday afternoon, last night. And I was still doing interviews at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, I mean, I'll never truly know, but it definitely does have some sort of stimulus on that front. But yeah, the brain stuff's really fascinating. So yeah, tell me more about the product, Cerathrive, because it's shipping now, right?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes, I know. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we spoke and I told you it was shipping in. But yeah, no, I finally delivered all the pre-orders. So everyone's got the device. I now have stock in the warehouse. Cool. I've even ordered the next batch because I'm kind of working through this stock. So it's going good. I mean, it's going slowly, which is kind of my intention a little bit because I have a lot to do in terms of research and support now.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely getting there. And I'm getting some really nice feedback and I'm getting some really good testimonials, which is also interesting because then you see what's responding quickly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, IBS, people who've had IBS where they've bought the device for something else, probably like, you know, they've got some dementia, but the IBS clears up first.
Yeah,
That's been interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of shiny red light, that's what most people think of anyway. Well, I think the initial reaction is, you're treating the gut. But it's surprising that it's the link between the gut and the brain. I was just talking to Aaron Rogers from Kinneon. So they're working on a gut product. And he was sharing some of the science and stuff involved in this. It's fascinating stuff. What about like ulcers, anything like that? I mean, have you looked at... Actually, no, the thought just popped into my head. Is there a problem if someone's obese? Like, really?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, is it kind of...
I think that visceral adipose tissue will definitely absorb the light.
Yeah.
And there's not much research on it. There was a guy who was doing some experiments using meat that he was buying from butcher shops and assessing the penetration into all the meat. So I said to him, did you get some fat and look at the fat? Yeah. And he said, well, pork's very fatty. And I'm like, well, no, not really. It's still all tissue because I have some ladies who have some excess visceral tissue and they definitely didn't respond as quickly. And in fact, I asked them to switch and put it on the back and then they rang me up and said, it's working now.
Yeah, wow.
So this is purely subjective and non-clinical and I have got no basis for it, but I think probably that kind of tissue will absorb the light and maybe not necessarily have the same function because, you know, there's not the mitochondria there.
Yeah, totally.
So that is a good question because, of course, in the mouse model, none of that comes out. But humans are very different, aren't they?
Yeah.
Different shapes and sizes, different...
Yeah.
You know, even we had the question about genetics, which I think was really more a question about skin tone.
Right.
Because the more melanin that you have in your body, you're going to absorb the light too. So there are, with humans, I think, quite a range of variations that come into consideration for a home use device when you're trying to get the dose right.
Yeah. And it just shows how complex that whole dosing topic is, right? Because there are so many variables.
There are so many variables. But I would say if people have got a little bit of excess adipose tissue to maybe use a different target site.
Right.
Because I think...
Like, you mean...
like maybe not put it on a bit... maybe put it on the back side instead. Because I think it will affect the impedance of the light into the organ if you're trying to get like to the actual gut.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I know you're involved in a course share more about that. Brain, PBM and the brain,
yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
A neurology module. Well, this is because I did one of the first university qualifications in PBM.
That's right.
Which is in Montpellier in France. I mean, if anybody needs an excuse to go to the south of France, I don't know. But so fabulous. It's in Nîmes, actually. And so I obtained the qualification, which was great. It's nice to have that validation, and it's something where, not many people can say they've got a qualification in PBM. So this is adding to the industry's credibility. Damien Villiers is the one who's arranging it all, but he asked me to be involved in the neurology module. So that's going ahead in November. Also in south of France. But we will be doing it so people can live stream.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so people can live stream in. It's also simultaneous translation in French and English.
That's cool. That's cool. And I'll put all the details down below. Going back to the brain then. So we know when it comes to like treating muscle joints, there's very little, if any, side effects. Potentially burns, maybe if you're really overdoing it from an intensity point of view. What about the brain? Like if you're shot, let's say you've got a panel, just take a regular panel and you're literally sitting next to it for 12 hours or something crazy like that. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? Like, well, should people be really careful?
Yeah, I always err on the side of caution because obviously you do not want to mess with your brain in any shape or form. So you can heat your brain, which is probably not the best thing to do. So no, I think it's probably good to stick to short bursts of light. I mean, there isn't any known side effects, and I haven't heard of anyone having an adverse effect. One thing I will say, though, that I have noticed with people who have maybe got some kind of glaucoma or something going on with their eyes, if you do look at a very bright light, we know that it increases blood flow, light, so potentially that could be a contraindication. Right. So I always say to people, don't look in the light. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of studies about macular degeneration, and that's cool, but it's a very specific dose that they're doing for that. So I'm always very careful about eyes, and I always say, if in doubt, do a little bit less and build up. Yeah. But, there's no point in overdoing these things. There doesn't seem to be a benefit. And in fact, if you think about how quantum processes work in nature, they're very energy efficient. Nature wants to use the minimum amount of energy to get the work done. That's the point, really. Yeah. So if you have to really put a ton of energy in, you're probably not doing it right, and you're going to burn something out.
Yeah, it's a good point. What about then saturating the whole brain? I mean, is there a potential risk there that we're stimulating areas that may already be out of balance, overactive, maybe epilepsy or something like that? Are you aware of any issues on that front? Like, could someone treat their brain with one of these full head helmets, quite a powerful one, and then all of a sudden they're having a seizure, or they're triggering, I don't know, old issues that they may have fixed? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I have to legally put in the caveat that I'm not allowed to talk about anything medical or give any advice or have any opinion, because I'm not a medical doctor.
Yes.
So for sure I can't say. And certainly for my device and for a lot of these products, they don't have any registration for brain health. So they shouldn't be sold and can't really be used to treat anything like that. And I think certainly epilepsy I'd be very careful about. But, from some of the studies where they seem to show that different brain areas respond differently to the light and certainly to the pulsing, that's interesting, and I think we just don't know enough.
Yeah.
I always I always target the forehead and maybe the cerebellum, because hair is a barrier, and whether it concentrates the light or whether it blocks it, for a home device, I'm going for consistency. So, if someone like yourself uses it, it's very different. Someone with a big afro uses it. It's very difficult to then say, okay, this 10 minutes is a dose. So from my point of view, it's easier to go through where there's no hair. And there's so much going on in the prefrontal cortex. But we still don't know what's the effect of shining it on different brain areas.
Yeah.
We don't know, really.
I get a lot of questions about, it's like, could we be overexciting? Because it's a not a stimulant, it's the wrong word, but you're energizing cells in a way, right? So it's like, could we bring something going, Especially with, my son has epilepsy, right? So that example's always close to home, but it definitely makes you stop and think. It's like, could you do something that you don't really want to do, You know what I mean, right? Like if you're coming in.
The whole point is you don't want it to do any harm, right? That's the whole point. It would be awful. But there's no documented evidence of that in all of these studies. Really? Yeah. And like Paolo, who's doing his stuff in the psychiatric thing, there's no...
Yeah.
But I mean, definitely epilepsy is a contraindication, although it's usually through the eyes, right? That is triggered.
It's the flash of stimulus.
But you don't know. I mean, maybe there are some parts of the brain that could be triggered. I suppose it's just a numbers game. We have to keep doing it under fairly controlled conditions.
Yeah.
But potentially.
So is there anything else that you've just discovered or learnt the last 24 hours or so that you think the red light therapy community should know about, or is there anything that you're working on that you want to share with the world?
There's tons.
Yeah.
There's tons of interesting information that's coming out, and I'm sure it's going to filter down. You know, things like what pulsing schedule to use, what regime to use, what order to use it in. But I think that's something that's going to come out. I'm certainly following up, and I'm going to be upgrading my protocols, and then I'm looking to do some education, because I think then we can maybe answer these questions more. And also the other thing I'm trying to do is get a platform together so people can bring in all their wearable data. So I use Heads Up, I'm sure you've come across them, but they allow me to bring in any data. So if people want to come on board, if they have my device, I offer them to come on board and submit their data if they want to. And my app can track what they're doing if they want to, it's purely voluntary. But that way we can start to gather some trend analysis. Yeah. So I think, over the course of a year, if you start to get a few hundred people who are coming and submitting their data, that's going to really help. It's kind of, I call it citizen science, right? Yeah. It's kind of, it's almost biohacking science. We're kind of doing away with that clinical trial for now. So, okay, let's see what really happens in real time. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm more excited about trying to get some data. And I think here it's interesting that people do seem to be a bit more open to that. Yeah. In my presentation, that it wasn't a total, no, you can't do that because it's not registered. People are like, yeah, we can see that there is a lot of data there that is potentially useful, even if it's just useful for them to feed into a big trial.
Well, that's it. I mean, you look at, bodybuilding, car racing, all sorts of things. Like often it's come from people experimenting and then word gets out and then, hey, try this on or try this technique. And then the research is done, sometimes decades after it's been well known in the community to be effective, and and then the research is done and it's like, oh yeah, this is a thing, and we can tweak it a little bit more. So I think it's cool. I think it's a great way to go about it. And with all the technology and wearables and software we have today, like why not? Why not tap into that? So definitely excited to see how that plays out. You said there were a few things, so I want to give you the opportunity to share as much as possible.
Well, I mean, because I'm kind of interested not just in the brain, but in the whole gut-brain connection. There's people who are coming from a different point of view, like how actually is it working on the gut?
Yes.
And how is that affecting the brain in turn? So there's people here and they're, leaky gut has been like an alternative medicine thing for a long time. But now here, people are actually talking about it, not in those terms. They're talking about how you have these interpermeable membranes and things like that. It's just another word for what people have been saying for a long time. And it's like, wow, that's interesting that this has started to become a point of discussion, that how can actually mesh together the gut. Then you get changes, of course, in the metabolites that are coming from all this bacteria and how that's getting to the brain. Yeah. So that whole gut-brain thing is becoming a big talking point. And of course, people are beginning to kind of wheedle out, okay, butyrates are having this effect on sleep, or, this. So you can start to tweak it a little bit. And, okay, when do you want to do the gut thing? Should you do it before the brain? Yeah. So for me, that's very interesting that people are talking about it more. And people are asking a lot more questions about, okay, how can we integrate these things? Because people in science, they're kind of very much in their own little lanes. So here at least there's a bit of an interdisciplinary approach, because, sometimes you're in a lecture, you might as well sit and watch the next one. It's not about, I'm not really interested in that. And then you discover, of course, this totally links with what I'm doing. So, I think there's going to be a lot more come out. I think, what is it? Is it 30 or 40 years we're at now? 30 years. This is their 30-year anniversary. And there are some people saying, what have we come in 30 years? We still don't know how it works. But from my point of view, I think you can see that there's so much information and people talking now that I think maybe, it would be nice to think we're on a tipping point of getting this a little bit more mainstream, because people are starting to make different connections and use things together. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely when people get results so quickly with no downside. I mean, a couple $100 for some products, right? Like
yes. And there's a lot of stuff, because some stuff is now kind of, there isn't anything else, like aura mucositis or like side effects of cancer. There's nothing people can have done about that. So PBM is really changing the game for those people, because it's being accepted, because there just isn't another option. The pharmaceuticals, just don't work for that. So, once you get one disease, then it gets into hospital, people become familiar with it. That could be something that's really helpful. So at the moment, that's the thing everybody's talking about. Great. Let's now hop on to the next thing. We don't need... and the opiate thing. I don't know if you heard them talking about the opiate crisis. People are actually being able to come off of opiates because you can actually rewire your brain with the synaptogenesis and the neurogenesis effect, which is totally different. Because even if you're weaned off drugs, if you don't do drugs for 10 years, your brain still hasn't been rewired.
Right.
So now people are being able to actually change what's going on with their brain, so they got much more chance of not having a relapse of all these opiates. That's fabulous. I mean, just think of the problem that we have with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I spoke to Ani from Power Medic yesterday, and they're having amazing success with fertility. There's a woman who tried everything, IVF, everything. And they're incredible results. And he's like, he's been in the space for 42 years. And he said this is like the most proudest sort of achievement. He's like, he calls them, what do you call them? Laser baby.
Oh, that's great.
Because he's like, we've created 500 human beings. It sounds very godlike.
It does. I get it though. It's
you get
fabulous.
his point, right? Like, and it's just from light.
Non-toxic, non-invasive.
Mm-hmm. And rather inexpensive now with LEDs, the price of LEDs and lasers, of course. But it's exciting times, and it's cool, like the products, that are coming out, yours, of course, and all the work that you're doing, being able to share it with the community. Obviously, I'm very appreciative for your time and your knowledge. Where can people find out more about you, you got a lot of things to share. Yourself, the course, later in the year, and of course the device, the Cerathrive.
Yeah, so mainly it's all just at Cerathrive, right? So people, CERA, Cerathrive. I have LinkedIn, I have all the socials, and I put everything up there. I tend to be better at LinkedIn because I'm a bit old school. But the course is at Montpellier, but everything also should be on my website, cerathrive.com.
Okay.
But Damien Villa at Montpellier in university. If people look that up, type in photobiomodulation. But everything else I'm trying to keep as updated as I can on all of my socials so that people can keep up and keep the website up to date.
How do you do it all? I mean, you're like flying everywhere. You're at these conferences all the time.
You're
I know. And you're presenting.
I know. It's luckily I can get high on my own supply, really, isn't it?
That's crazy. It's impressive. So must be all that red light.
I try and be an advocate of what I'm doing. Obviously I outsource some of the stuff. I mean, that's the way to do it. Yeah. So and I have a really lovely team. My team are here now. My backers, who are also my manufacturers, so Lightree Ventures are here, and they're kind of doing their thing. They're also, extremely supportive.
Cool. Well, I'll put all the links and resources that you mentioned. I'll put everything down below. If you have questions, obviously reach out to Cera or leave them in the comments down below. And thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, lovely to see you as always.
I'm sure we'll do it again at the next one.
I'm sure.
And that is a wrap. If you want to learn more about the Cerathrive product, links are down below. Also, I've interviewed Cera 2 or 3 times now, so check out my old interviews with her all down below, or check out this interview up here, which YouTube recommends for you. So chances are it's going to be good.